Well, I'm now joined by the TV presenter Rebecca Wilcox, and Rebecca's mother is Dame Esther Ranson, who recently revealed she has lung cancer and has joined Dignitas, the assisted dying clinic in Switzerland, and she has been campaigning to change the law. In fact, Keir Starmer says that he made a promise to Dame Esther and that he is sort of making good on that promise to have a vote. Rebecca, thanks very much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
And also joining us is the author Paul Carroll. Paul has written a very moving book on the subject of assisted dying called Shaking Hands with Elvis. Paul, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Rebecca, let's begin with you. First of all, how is your mum doing? She's a much loved figure, real national treasure. How's she doing, and how do you all feel about the announcement about this vote?
Well, it's the most impossible question to answer because she's obviously quite private. Having lived her life in the public eye, she's decided to sort of step back a bit, except for huge campaigns like this, which she's brilliant at. And she has a real purpose, and it's just exhausting and a relief that somebody's bringing it through as their private member's bill. We couldn't be more grateful for it, and we really hope that the free vote goes ahead and evidence-based, fact-based thoughts are parried in the hall, and maybe we'll come to some sort of common sense which will reflect our country's brilliant compassion and humane ways that have usually led the world. And we are just standing at the back of a queue of really clever countries that have gone before us, for want of a better word. But Mum is okay. I'm not sure that this will affect us as a family, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it for everybody else that we've met along the way and heard about, and those we haven't met or heard about, and those that have gone before who have had the most awful, extraordinarily terrible experiences that they shouldn't have had, and they had to suffer at the end of their lives, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the very end of your life. Yes, it's a 6 months terminal diagnosis, but it's really those last few days, weeks, whatever it is, where the pain barrier will not be touched by opioids, and the suffering is just horrible. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we're hoping to affect, and we just want a compassionate law.
And look, there are obviously concerns from people, and they're good faith concerns about the worries about vulnerable people and protecting vulnerable people who might be pushed into this, or maybe the thin end of the wedge. What would you say to those concerns, Rebecca?
Well, I'd say that with the current laws that we have, there are no safety measures, that vulnerable people are more at risk right now than they would be if this law was brought in. The safeguards involved with it, the ones that we're looking for, would mean that 2 doctors, perhaps a judge as well, would have to sign off anybody thinking about it, that you would have to have this terminal diagnosis with 6 months or less to live, that it wouldn't be about disability, mental health, that you wouldn't have the right, sadly, if you had incapacity, because I know that that's been upsetting for many people who are suffering from MND, motor neurone disease, who were hoping to be included in this. But that's not what I'm afraid that we're on about. We are looking at a very focused law that protects people at the very end of their life when the pain is just too much, and it stops it, and it gives you a choice. So it stops it, the only choice being pain or spending your life savings flying off to Switzerland or wherever it may be, and your family risking prosecution if they accompany you. I know that not many people go to prison, but you can get up to 14 years. And it can take 2 years of your life to go through the investigation. The Select Caring Committee report revealed that there was a case study of 2 daughters that accompanied their mother, and on return they were investigated for 2 years. They interviewed everybody, their work colleagues, their family, and one of the daughters became suicidal at the end of it. It seems very cruel and muddled, the law at the moment. Okay. And what we're asking for is a very straightforward, this is what we're allowed to do. There's no slippery slope. Look at the report. Look at the inquiry. It's all laid out. It's very clear, fact-based evidence.
OK, well, look, stay on the line, Rebecca. Let's bring Paul Carroll into the conversation. Now, Paul, you, I believe, were once in favour of the concept of assisted dying, but you then changed your mind. Tell us why.
I was indeed. I probably had a liberal outlook, thinking that under certain circumstances, as Rebecca has just outlined, 6 months to live, terminal illness, giving their own free consent, it seemed reasonable. But when I decided to write a novel about 4 characters who'd decided to embark on an assisted death path towards end of life, the research I conducted, which was very, very extensive, just set certain alarm bells going. And this is really the point, now that the debate has been green lighted, Kim Ledbetter's private members bill, that I want this debate, and I think it is positive that this debate is being held, but it needs to be held in a thorough and robust way, because I think the argument at the moment, and compliments to Rebecca's mother and assisted dying campaigners, they put a very compelling but emotionally based case forward for this. My observations of what's happened in other countries around the world demands MPs look beyond the emotional, look beyond creating a law, changing a law which has stood for centuries, which, as well intended as it is, draws in far more people into that net. And I think we've only got to look at, say, Canada, for example, who introduced assisted dying in 2016. Within 3 years, the criteria was challenged. So it was very similar to what's being proposed by Kim Ledbetter. Terminally ill, 6 months, crumbled within 3 years under legal challenge. As people said, well, why is that person who's got maybe 6 months to live and 2 doctor certificates got more of a right to take their own life or end their own life than I have? I'm suffering from a chronic illness. I'm suffering from incurable pain. I'm suffering from depression. I've had enough of life. I'm old and I've had enough of life. Why do I not qualify and he or she does?
And that is an important point, because I was looking at the statistics around Canada, and the figures have really gone up. And actually, the Canadian government had been due to expand their assisted dying laws. It's called MAID, their package of legislation. They were going to extend that to mentally ill people back in March, and it's been delayed until 2027.
But it's only on hold.
It's on hold, exactly. And I also covered a case in the Netherlands it was a case in the Sunday Times. I spoke to the journalist that covered it, about a younger woman who had severe mental health issues. She'd had a terribly traumatic sexual attack on her, and she had been granted permission to end her life. Rebecca, I suppose that is the question that many people who completely would agree that everything that the campaign and that your mum has put forward, but in these other countries, there has, at the beginning, these laws are very tightly drafted, and over time they have expanded. What would you say to that concern that people do have?
I'm afraid I would say that it's categorically untrue, that the countries that have brought in laws around the legislation that we're talking about, which mirrors the US state of Oregon, it mirrors that one, and it's nothing to do with Canada, and it's nothing to do with depression or emotional crisis, which of course is a terrible thing to experience, and my heart goes out to anybody that's going through that. But that's not what this is about. This is about a terminal diagnosis where your body is physically dying, and it's only shortening your death. It's not shortening your life. And I would say that this is a cross-party movement, that there's agreement on both sides. This is not just pushed forward by the Labour Party and by Keir Starmer, who has been very pro-assisted dying, even when he was at the CPS. So we're very grateful for that. But I want everybody to see that this is a holistic movement, that it's been going for years. And what we are trying to do is prove that in Oregon, for 25 years, it has worked well. There has not once been an abuse of it to coerce a vulnerable person into taking their life early.
What about the situation in Canada then?
I don't think Canada is a good model for us. And I think, as much as I massively respect you, I think that Canada is a very separate issue. I don't think they're doing it well. I mean, there are many countries around the world who are not doing democracy well at the moment. I'm not saying that we follow them in what they're doing. And this is quite different. This is about choice. This is about choice for people at the end of their life who actually do not want to have those last few days or weeks of pain. And it's about families being with the people they love until the very end. Because if Mom goes off to Switzerland, she has to go well, and 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 before her time, because you have to be healthy to travel. She has to go alone or we will be prosecuted. And if we do go, obviously we get that horrible investigation. We get this weird plane journey back with an urn. I mean, can you imagine my mother in an urn? It wouldn't contain her. I mean, it's all unfathomable to me that she has created so much scope for change in our society and so much scope for choice within our society, particularly for the vulnerable people. And she is dying now, and she is facing what could be the most awful death. And what she is saying is that people like her should have a choice.
Okay, let's just bring
a kind of way.
So, Paul, I mean, you've had that. What about the choice for people who are still of sound mind, who have got 6 months left to live, and they just want to go in their own way with their family around them?
Well, I think the use of the word choice is very interesting and is part of the compelling campaign, as are terms like good death. I think a lot of euphemism around this is basically an unnatural and forced conclusion of life. I think going back to Rebecca's point about Canada not being a good model, the facts are there. They're indisputable. You look at Holland, you look at Belgium, similar, where it's not restricted to people with terminally ill. In my book, Shaking Hands with Elvis, we follow this, choice idea, because the fear is coercion, either direct coercion for people to make this choice. I don't want to be a burden, or people saying, can you afford healthcare? Or basically indirect coercion, maybe from family members or carers. And I think these are the things MPs should be looking at, not just the law's not going to end. If an assisted dying law is brought in, the campaigners, such as Rebecca and her mother, and well-intentioned as they are, does their job finish then? Because that's when the problem's going to start. Okay, well, that's when they're going to need to be in the fray again. Okay, well, look, really eloquent and very emotional, very powerful arguments from both sides. And I think it's really important to say that, whichever point of view you come at on this, it is with incredible good faith and a lot of, real kind of personal experience, often sort of seeing a loved one go through a really, really horrible time. So I think as these debates go forward, we have to respect that both sides do have really, really strong views on this, and they are good faith views as well. My thanks to Rebecca Wilcox there and to Paul Carroll. Jill's message in saying it's not one or the other, but good palliative and end of life care or assisted dying. Absolutely, assisted dying needs to be explored appropriately, but hospices are desperately struggling with funding. On average, 25% of funding comes from central funding. Do we really support dying patients by selling second-hand furniture and clothes, or by somebody running a marathon? People need accessible, holistic pain and emotional support. Now, Jill, I think you make such a good point. I think people don't realise that hospices particularly are on such a patchwork of funding. They're having a really difficult time with funding. It's often quite a postcode lottery as well. And we all know that kind of social care as well is a huge issue for people. So this stuff is very complicated, and I think it's good that a discussion has been had, but we do need to explore all different angles of it. But a really, really important discussion, and one which I'm sure I know for a fact we'll be covering in great deal on Times Radio as it makes its passage through Parliament. Right, coming up next,